Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt and welcome to the New Brick Workshop and this Workshop Notes video number 26. Now this is the first Workshop Notes video from the new location, so let's get started. Now because of creating the new workshop, I haven't really been keeping up with answering various queries that have popped up on previous videos that I've made, but I'm going to try and sort that out today. And I'm going to start with this. This is a rounding over cutter set which I bought from Axminster a couple of months ago. Now you may not be aware, but I made a very large dining room table. The top was over 2 meters long and over 1 meter wide, and it was made of solid oak. I also had a pair of matching benches. Now I needed to round over the edges of the tabletop and also the bench tops, and only just a little tiny bit, maybe only 2 millimeter in radius, sort of round over. So just a little bit of gentle rounding over. Very important if you've got a really large sort of classic looking piece of furniture. If we look at the router cutter profile, you see it doesn't look the same as a normal cutter that you would use for rounding over. A normal cutter you'd use for rounding over might have a sharp edge here and a sharp edge there, and this would be a true quarter section of a circle. But what these cutters have is a gentle introduction at this end, around the corner, and then it goes out. Rather than going out straight down like that, it goes out at a very slight angle. And then you've got the ball bearing here. So there's no way you can get any form of gouging at this end, and you've got a bit more wiggle room at this end as well. And that's the advantage. Let me demonstrate this for you. You then have no option but to then take your sander and try and get rid of that cut effect there. And it's never really very satisfactory. And also, most of the little rounding over cutters you get are just too big a radius. And I don't like this. This is just nowhere near what I wanted to achieve on that dining table. So let's have a look at the cutter set from Axminster. Now there are 4 cutters in this set, and they've got radii ranging from 1 millimeter up to 2.5 millimeters. So you've got a lot of choice there. And the actual radius is actually marked on the cutter itself. Now getting this adjusted for height is a lot easier because the top part of the curve is a little gentler than a straight sudden end. And so I've got that just where I want it, lock that off, and now I can do my cut. Just make sure I'm locked up here. Yep, here we go. So now you have that absolutely perfect edge, and that is exactly what I have on my dining room table and those matching benches. Now you've got 3 other sizes to choose from, depending on the nature of your piece of work. If you're doing a small box, then you might go for the 1 millimeter radius. The choice is yours. Now I hope you can see how perfect that edge is there. Absolutely super duper. And as a matter of interest, I dropped the cutter a lot further down just to see what effect it might be. And that's quite a pleasing little profile. Now sometimes if you're a little bit arthritic, using the chamfer cutter on a lot of holes can be a little bit of a bind. So a friend of mine, Michael Clark, has made a little gadget. Here we go. And this basically is a big handle to go on the end of the chamfer cutter. Just tighten up these 2 screws like so. That holds the cutter in place. It's made from Velcromet, and you can get a really good grip on this and do loads and loads of holes with absolutely no problem at all. Thanks very much, Michael. Very kind of you. Now, quite a few people have been curious about how I start and stop my extractor. They said, have you got a switch mounted on your planing machine? The answer technically is yes. And here it is. In fact, it's a roving socket, and basically I've got power coming into this socket, and it's mounted on this piece of wood. And I've got 4 magnets. So I can plug something in here, and I can stick this on anything which is magnetic. And so when the machine is in thicknessing mode as it is right now, I can stick it on these beds which are used for surfacing. And when the machine's down for surfacing, then I can stick it on any other part of the machine that's within easy reach. And when it's not attached to the planing machine, I can attach it to my garage door if I wish, or actually quite usefully onto the top of my new Cyclone. Now, I've had quite a few questions about the new cabinet that I've got for the XCarve machine. Now, when we were moving from the old location to the new one, I wanted to cut down the actual size that the XCarve cabinet took. You remember the old one was built for the big 1000mm machine, and my machine now is the smallest 750. So this is what I've done. I've got a lid that can be opened and closed like so, and the lid will stay there under its own steam but I wouldn't risk keeping my fingers down here for very long. So I've got these two blocks, and they're shaped so that they go one under there and the other one under here, and they're marked left and right, and they're a perfect fit. So that now keeps that lid nice and safe. And if you have a look down in here, you can see the X-Carve itself. And this front panel now lifts off, and it lifts straight up, like so. And it does that because I've got a dowel here, which fits neatly into a little slot there. And at the bottom, you can see one on this side, there's a dowel sticking out. And on the underside, on both sides, I've got a little slot for that. So the front can be quite reasonably secure. Now, I use this space for keeping all sorts of odds and ends. This is a little top that fits perfectly on a sustainer, and if I wanted the computer at my side here, I put a little stack of sustainers and put this on it. I've got the hose which I use with the CNC. I've got a little baby cabinet which I use. I've got a little bag of screws. Now, these screws are used to secure the complete cabinet, so that if it's being moved any distance inside the workshop, or indeed when I move from the old workshop to this one, I can use these screws to screw up all the bits of the cabinet, including that front piece, so it's absolutely secure for transit. And then I've got this magic piece of wood. And this piece of wood is exactly the right size for the job it's about to do. Just push it there, up against there. Now, this whole part now hinges upwards. I'll start that process by pulling this towards me. And you can see now the X-Carve is coming up into view. And did you hear that click? I've got a couple of spring clips that I've made out of bits of brass, one under there and one under the other side, and they've now clicked into position, and they will hold this in this position. It's not fully upright, and it holds it there long enough so that I can get this front piece, which we had at the very beginning. And remember that piece of wood, it's down below? Well, that tells me how far this should go inwards. So at the bottom, I line it up so it's level here, lift it the rest of the way, and I'm going to then move this into an upright position. I've got a pencil mark here that tells me where it should go. And the same at this end, pencil mark. And when it's in the right position, it sits down nicely because of a couple of pegs which it fits into. I have also got some stays that I can use to help brace this. I don't really need to use them. Now, if I want to make it absolutely secure, I've got a bracket here which is attached to the side and one on the other side. And I've got a couple of knobs which I've knocked up over some old bits and pieces. And I can put a knob in there, tighten this up. That's that one secure, and obviously I could deploy the other one as well. And then that now makes that really pretty rigid. Now, when the machine is tucked away, I get all the cables together and just keep them in place where they should be. I've got a power distribution rack here, one for the X-Carve. This is the X controller, that gives it its power. One for my computer, and I've got the computer power supply fixed on here, and one for the DeWalt router, which is there. And in order to keep the computer nearby, I use this little box which has got my various bits and pieces that go with the CNC. And there's a peg at the top here. This is the base. There's a big washer there, a hole in the middle. The washer is made of steel, and there are 4 magnets in there. So when this goes on here like so, I can rotate this, but it's not going to fall off if knocked. And I can then use the computer, which will drive the CNC. And I better explain what's going on here. Now, when the CNC drops down, I don't want this carriage to drop. And so what I've done is I've got these brackets here which hold it firmly in place, and they're held in with a pair of screws there. And I lower the writer down so that its collet goes into a block of wood which is held in place here. And then that stops any torsional effect from the writer itself. And this was the arrangement I used when I moved the whole CNC from the old location to this location in its cabinet. I made no other preparation inside here. Everything was left as it is now. And then when I got here, I set it up, and I actually used it to make that TV bracket the other day. So that worked very well. Now, I'm sorry, I do not have plans for this cabinet available. I hope that this guided tour will give you the ability to design your own cabinet that works in the same way. And I should just point out, this is a drawer on my mobile bench, which I dedicate to the CNC. They're all my various cutters, which I might use. Lots of bits and pieces underneath there. And the computer, when it's not in use, goes in here, so it's safely out of the way. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is about jointing long boards. Now, this was a piece of the top for the dining room table, so you can see it's pretty hefty stuff, and it weighed a huge amount. Now, using the correct glue on a dining room tabletop or any other large piece of wood is really, really important. And I've learnt this from a professional cabinet maker who was also an antique restorer, and he's been a great friend of mine for many years. There are 2 things that you need to do. Now, I've just got these 2 Buckshee pieces of wood which I use on the Capex, just to illustrate this. Now, the grain of your boards in something you're joining together is going to be running like this. What you want to ensure is that the wood here can expand and contract as the seasons change or as the moisture level changes. And wood moves predominantly across the grain. So when it's really, really moist, it will expand outwards like this, and when it's really dry, it will contract. And these will move together if they're jointed properly. They will just move together. The whole thing will just move in and out gently, and you wouldn't even know it's happening. Now, what you need to ensure is that the glue, which is down this glue line, is not flexible. If that glue were flexible, it would allow a bit of extra relative movement between the 2 boards, and you don't want that. You want the glue along there to be fixed. Now, PVA is flexible, but urea formaldehyde glue, and this is Cascamite, and it's what I use, and I've used it on my big dining room table, dries hard. And this then will not allow creeping movement along the joint line. The next thing is, people say, well, I want to put some dominoes or dowels in or whatever. You can do that, and it's quite useful for lining up the boards so that they're flush along the top surface. And I've done that with my dining room table. I actually use some biscuits, but you can use dominoes or dowels as long as they're put in accurately so that the 2 surfaces are nice and flush. But what you must not do is to glue those in. And the reason is the grain in this piece of wood goes that way. So it is not going to move in that direction with the seasons. If these pieces of wood are going to expand and contract with the seasons, then there is a good possibility that the dowel, domino, whatever it is you've used, or biscuit, can cause the glue joint to break. And this friend of mine who I said he started his life as an antique restorer, he said that the majority of really sweet bits of antique that he's had to repair, that have had dowels put in which have been glued, those glue lines have broken, and it causes an unevenness across there, and you will be able to see it in time as the seasons go through. It will become apparent. So whatever you do, do not glue in any dowels, dominoes or biscuits that you use for a lining. They must be able to float in that joint. And the final thing I want to talk about is the dust hub, or rather the lack of the dust hub. In the old location, I had stuff in all sorts of parts of the workshop, and I had to have lots of ducting to take the extractor's effort to various places in the workshop. I don't need that here, so my extractor sits here and it can serve all of the machines very easily. And all I have to do is to unplug one hose and then plug another one in. So it actually improves the vacuum going to each of the tools. Now, in order to have a bit of discipline, so I don't start a tool without the extractor being connected, I use the philosophy of the dust hub. I've got a panel here which is connected to the front of the extractor. And on this panel, I've got various things plugged in. And there's a space there for my CMS unit, whichever one I'm using at the time. There's a place there for the capex, a place there for something that might be attached to this power cord. And I've got an extension from here that goes to my track saw cutting station, which is just behind me here. And the hose for that comes down here, so it can be plugged in easily as well. And when I want to change from one tool to another, I remove the hose, reconnect the other one, switch its power off and switch the power on at the new location. And it's that bit of discipline which I wanted to make sure one doesn't start a tool without the extractor being part of the operation. So that's the end of this workshop notes video from the new location. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.